What's up again, everybody? I'm Clayton. Welcome back to Ages of Film, and today I'm going to be reviewing Superman Returns, released in 2006, directed by Bryan Singer. But before I get into my review, while you're here, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, and join the pack, get in on all the fun. We're powering through, man. We're getting through the Superman movies leading up to the premiere of the new Superman movie by James Gunn, kicking off the new DC universe. So if you're a fan of Superman, you're a fan of DC, hopefully you'll enjoy these videos, man. So we've gone through the first four Christopher Reeve Superman movies, on to Superman Returns, kind of the black sheep of the Superman movies, if you will. So yeah, I'm going to break this movie down, talk about things I like, things I didn't like, give my overall rating at the end. Just a friendly reminder, guys, this is just my opinion on this movie. No need to be upset or offended by anything I have to say. Let me know your thoughts on Superman Returns in the comments section. And with that being said, let's get rocking. So, diving right in, I'm going to start with the positives, go to the negatives. So getting into the positives here, things I liked with Superman Returns. It had been a minute since I'd seen this movie. I saw this in theaters back in 2006 with my dad and my brother, and I wasn't big on it at the time, to be honest. I didn't really care for it. I saw it again a few years later, just to kind of see, what if my feelings about it had changed. And I don't remember them really changing at that point. Still didn't really like it a whole lot. So I watched it back for this review, and it had been about 15 years since I'd seen this movie. So yeah, a lot of time gone by. And so I was interested to see this time around if my feelings would change or not, because I know there are people out there that do really like this movie and do really enjoy it. So I felt like I was eager. Of all the Superman movies, this was the one I was most eager to come back to revisit, to see if my thoughts and feelings had changed. I didn't remember a whole lot about the film, so I felt like I was able to go into it with an open mind and be willing to change my thoughts on it. I will say, watching it back for this review, a lot did change for me. A lot did change. I actually came around on this movie to a degree. I would say I liked this movie. I don't love the movie. All right. So that might kind of tell you where my rating's going to fall. I like the movie. I don't love the movie. So I'll start with the things I like here. So getting into the positives, the score. I was so glad to hear and see that they brought back that original Superman score, baby. That awesome Superman score that I love so much. That was a big positive. And they amped it up. They made it more epic, more grand. It sounded like. I could be wrong, but it seemed like I've been watching all these Superman movies. It seemed like they tuned it up a bit, and I really enjoyed that. It was awesome, man. Great score, great soundtrack, really, all throughout this film. The score was really, really on point. There were a number of scenes and certain segments in the film even where the score really stood out and really popped for me, and that was something that I really enjoyed. I also really liked the cinematography in the movie this time around. It may be because, between the last time I saw this film 15 years ago and now, a lot has changed with me. I've done photography. I've been a cinematography student and film school. So, I've experienced a lot more. So I have a lot keener eye now for visuals, cinematography, framing, camera work than I certainly did 15 years ago, when I last saw this movie. So that was something that really stood out to me. I really enjoyed the cinematography. I thought it was beautifully shot. There were some great frames in this movie, just single shots. Even the angles, the camera angles that Singer used. There are a number of shots where one in particular I'm thinking of where it was a low angle shot where you're at, the people's level in the streets, and it's a low angle shot of Superman flying over the city. And I just thought that was a really cool shot because instead of giving you Superman's point of view, POV, which we've gotten a million times at this point in Superman movies, he actually decided to go with a civilian's POV, where you're on the street and you're looking up and seeing Superman fly across the sky. And I just thought that was an interesting shot. I liked it. It created a really cool effect of what it would feel like or see what it would be like. I'll get through it on one of these tries. What it would be like to be out on the streets as a civilian, look up and see Superman, flying across the sky. And it's a really cool shot, man. And there are a number of scenes that were just really beautifully put together. Great framing, great lighting and exposure. I love the filter on the lenses throughout this film. It created this darker tone, which I really enjoyed. It's one of the things that I really like about the DC universe is typically there, in my opinion, and I'm not, I'm certainly no Marvel guru or anything, but in my opinion, I feel like DC captures a more authentic, real, darker, grounded version of society than Marvel does. So, and that's something that I felt was missing a little bit in the Christopher Reeve films, no fault of its own. It was a product of its time, certainly. But I do like, also being just a massive Batman fan, I like darker tones typically with stories, if the tone fits the story. And I think the tone fits this particular story that they were trying to tell. So the tone, the lighting, all the stuff with the camera, the cinematography, really great stuff. The production design, the art, the set pieces that they created looked really good. It also fit the atmosphere and the tone that they were going for. I think that certainly helped. And I like the threats in this one. I felt a genuine threat for Superman, which is hard to do, if we're being honest with Superman, when you're as powerful and as just OP'd as Superman is to a lot of people. It can be hard to actually create a threat that feels legitimate for a character like Superman. Like how's anyone really going to put Superman in danger? What threat can someone actually create for Superman, for our main protagonist? But here I felt that with the plot that was being created and established by Luthor. I felt that threat for Superman, and that was something that I enjoyed. You should feel something for your protagonist. You should have that level of concern for your protagonist at some point. And I felt like that was absolutely there in this film by the plot that was being established by Luthor. So that was a positive for me. Speaking of Luthor, let's talk about him. Luthor, played by Kevin Spacey. And I thought Spacey did a really great job as Lex Luthor. He was definitely, there's just something in his eyes, man, that, he can go very sick, twisted, psychopathic through his eyes and his facial expressions. And I feel like he nailed that here. Don't get me wrong. I love Gene Hackman. I love me some Gene Hackman. And I thought Gene Hackman was a phenomenal Luthor, especially given the fact that he didn't have anything to go off of. Like, he was the first Luthor on the big screen, and he kind of set the precedent for all that would follow. And for me, I did think that Kevin Spacey did a really great job playing the character of Lex Luthor. He wasn't trying to copy Gene Hackman necessarily, but he kept, he definitely brought the essence of the character in his performance, and that was a strong positive. I was absolutely glued to the screen whenever Luther was on. So I thought he did a great job. He was kind of the standout actor. The standout role for me in this film was definitely Luther. I thought Kate Bosworth did a fine job as Lois. I don't know that she quite got to the level of Margot Kidder in the original, but she certainly did a fine job with what she had to work with. I liked her. I definitely, she had a charming presence. You definitely tell that she was giving it her all and really trying to do something with that character. And I liked her in the film as well. I liked the chemistry between Lois and Clark. In the film, I felt that they had a natural thing going on there, a natural chemistry. It didn't feel or come across forced or awkward, or like they were just reading lines off a script. It felt genuine, in my opinion. So, especially some of the just subtle looks that they would give each other, I felt like they brought a lot in those moments. And that was good to see. So yeah, I thought the chemistry with those two was really good. I liked the story, the story beats that they were kind of pursuing a little bit in this film, where it kind of touches on the world's need for a savior. And I mean, Lois kind of hints at it herself. She's giving the perspective of, a normal human that would say, I'm not in need of a savior. We don't need a savior. We can get on just fine. And Superman flies her up to the sky to show her his point of view, his perspective, and show her, look, from where I'm sitting, you guys do need a savior. I hear people crying out all the time because of his, sonic hearing, his ultra, heightened sense of hearing. He hears people yelling and help all the time. So from where he sits, they do need a savior, and they do need someone to help them. And I liked that, that story that they were kind of telling there, that the world does need a savior, because of, the different vices and evil things that we do to each other, to ourselves, and to the rest of the planet. We do need a savior. And so I liked kind of the different the discussion that they were playing with there. I thought that was a good story to tell, and I liked that in this movie we have a reason why Superman and Lois can't actually be together. That was one of the negatives I kind of touched on in the first Superman, is that Superman and Lois, they just kind of decide out of nowhere, we can't really be together, but we're never given a reason in the movie why they can't be together. Like, give us something. What? Because you guys are obviously flying around, reading poems to each other in the sky. It's like you're clearly getting on just fine. There's nothing that would be preventing you guys from being together. So why all of a sudden out of nowhere did y'all decide, hey, we can't do this? Here in this film, we actually get a legitimate reason for that. The fact that Lois is actually engaged. She's moved on. Superman's been away for 5 years. So he comes back. She's moved on. She's now engaged. She has responsibilities both as a mother and as a fiance to her betrothed, if you will. So we actually have a reason why that relationship can't work. And it's heartbreaking, because you see the passion there, you see the chemistry, and that they love each other. But that also comes with being Superman, and part of the responsibilities that he has, the responsibilities that she has, it won't work. So I appreciated that they actually give us that reason why they can't be together in this film, because then it also makes you feel, it generates that emotion for the characters as well. So that was something that I did really like in this film also. So moving into the negatives, I do have some complaints with this film, while it's still a very good film, still a movie I did really enjoy, there were still some negatives I had with it. One of them being one of my biggest complaints here is Brandon Routh as Superman and Clark. For me, he's just not Christopher Reeve. He's just not Christopher Reeve. And I get that it was going to be very hard to replace Christopher Reeve with anybody. That was going to be major shoes to fill, because Reeve set the bar way up there. So it was gonna have to take someone super special to match that. But I definitely felt the absence of Reeve in this film. I could appreciate that Brandon was trying. He was. You could tell he's trying to do what he can as Superman and as Clark. He just didn't. It just didn't work for me personally. He didn't have the presence, the on-screen presence that Reeve had. I don't think that he really played Superman and Clark in any different. Like if you're listening to his cadence, his pitch, watching his posture and his mannerisms as Clark, it's not really any difference from who he is as Superman, which then raises the question, why is nobody able to tell that he's Superman, especially Lois? Having spent as much time with him in the past as they spent together, you mean to tell me that a pair of glasses is keeping her from noticing that that's clearly Superman? Because there's nothing in Brandon's performance, there's nothing that he's doing with his body, his face, his voice that would suggest it's not Superman. Where with Christopher Reeve, you could tell that that's not Superman. Like the way that he walked, he was hunched over when he would be Clark. He had a completely different performance in his body when he was Clark than when he was Superman. It was very noticeable. So you would just look at Clark and be like, well, that dude's Superman. No, because he played it very differently. And Routh, I just felt like didn't really do that. And so he's definitely several notches below Christopher Reeve, in my opinion. I don't think he did a terrible job. And again, I can appreciate the fact that he is trying. He just fell short, in my opinion. And that was a negative for me, especially having watched the past 4 Superman movies before this film. I felt the absence of Christopher Reeve in this film. So that's that. If I'm being honest, that would be one of my negatives with this film. Also, some of the visual effects, some of the CGI doesn't hold up all that well. It looks good for the most part. I think they make it work, but there's definitely some shots, one where Superman's trying to save this plane from going down, and they cut to one shot where it's very clearly CGI, a CGI computer created image of Superman carrying the plane. They cut to another part of the plane, and then they cut back to Superman, and now it's very clearly Routh as Superman. But you can tell between just those 2 brief cuts, you can tell one is computer graphics, computer generated CGI, and then the other is clearly the actor. So I don't know that the CGI held up all that great for me. It was noticeable in certain scenes, and it took me out of those scenes, if I'm being honest. I also felt there was some filler in this movie. You know, Superman kind of just, there's a lot of scenes of Superman just flying around, saving this person. Now let's show Superman going over here, saving this person. Now let's show Superman over here saving this person. It's like, what is all this for? We know Superman can save people. We know he can save anybody. So it's like, this isn't doing anything for the characters in this film. This isn't doing anything necessarily for the story. That might sound like a contradiction, because I said in the positive, I liked that they told a story about how the world needed Superman. Here's the thing. You don't need to show us all of those scenes of Superman saving people, because the plot in the third act is enough to get there. What Luthor is doing with creating essentially a new continent, wiping out over 1 billion people, that is enough to tell us as the viewer, yeah, they are kind of in need of a savior. They need someone to be able to protect them. That plot is all you need to show us, to get us there. But we don't need 20 minutes of just Superman flying around saving different people in different situations. So I definitely felt like there was some filler. It didn't need to be 2 hours, 2.5 hours. You could trim off a lot of that runtime, keep it tighter in the editing room, and it would work a bit for me. But I kind of got taken out of some of those long segments of Superman just saving this person, flying over here, save this person, fly over here, save this person. It's like, I already know he can do this stuff. Like, this isn't really doing anything for anybody. It's just kind of filler. And so I don't really feel like all that stuff was needed. Also, a couple of things with Luthor. You know, he escapes from prison. He'd been in prison for 5 years. He gets out, but no one's really looking for him. You know, and they even raise that at a meeting room in the Daily Planet, like who's going to cover what. And Perry White, played by the great Frank Langella, they're discussing who's going to cover what. And someone pitches, who's going to cover Luthor, you know, being out. And they're basically like, oh, we don't need to. He's irrelevant. Like, okay. This kind of stuff bothers me as a DC guy, DC fan, Superman fan. Know your characters, okay? If you're going to bring these characters on screen, know your characters. Do them justice, all right? Lex Luthor is not just a criminal. He's not just a criminal mastermind. He is basically like a bad version of Marvel's Tony Stark. That's basically who Lex Luthor is. A many times over billionaire who is also very full of himself, very out there with it. You know, like Tony Stark doesn't apologize for who he is. He's very out there in the public square about who he is. Luthor's kind of the same way. Like, especially if you read a lot of the Superman comics with Luthor, he's not off trying to hide from the cops. He's not off trying to hide from people. He's like, yeah, I'm Lex Luthor, dude. Cry about it. What are you going to do? You know, like, and here, like, this is one of the most powerful people on the planet, you know, from a power of leverage, power of money, power of resources. Luthor possesses all these things. That's what makes him such a great threat. That and his brilliant mind. And I just felt like they didn't really do much there. You know, he's just kind of off hiding. No one's looking for this guy, even though he's clearly should be public enemy number one, the person that everyone is out trying to find and, you know, arrest. I just felt like they weren't really doing any of that. And also I felt like they weren't showing Luthor's intellect very well. Like he had basically his cronies were figuring everything out, you know, where in the first one, like Gene Hackman was the one figuring most of the stuff out. He figured out that kryptonite would kill Superman. He figured out how to get the plans for the missiles. He figured out and set up the plot between, you know, the two places where Superman needed to rescue. He was the one that paid attention to the Daily Planet's report and figured out, hey, Superman can't see through lead. Let me design this box of lead, put kryptonite in there. Like Luthor was the one doing that stuff. You could see the smarts, the intellect on Luthor. Here, his cronies are basically figuring everything out for him. He's not. They played more into his psychopathy, which was good to see. But he's also very cunning. He's the most brilliant mind, or at least one of the most brilliant minds in DC. And he's incredibly powerful because of the wealth and resources that he possesses. And they just really didn't show that to a satisfying degree for me personally. You may think otherwise, and that's totally fine. But for me, I wasn't satisfied with how they used Luthor and some of the plot and stuff that they did with him. One other negative I got to mention, the fact that Superman would be in love with Lois for all these years and even have a kid with her and yet not reveal who he was. That seems that's a big ask. For me personally, that's a big ask. You're telling me that you're going to be so in love with this girl that you'll even have a kid with her, but yet you're going to keep and withhold the biggest secret of yourself, the biggest secret of your existence from this woman, from this girl. I find that very hard to believe, me personally. So that was the one other thing that I was like, I don't know that I can go there. But yeah, anyways, overall, guys, I know we're getting on a bit. Overall, very good film. I did thoroughly enjoy it. My overall rating here, I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. Very good movie. I definitely enjoyed it much better than I did the past 2 times that I saw it, which were many years ago, including once in the theater. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5. Those are my thoughts on Superman Returns. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Stay tuned for more Superman reviews coming. And until next time, you freaks, kick it and rock on.